Hello, everybody. I am CheeseSlice. I'm the engineer and producer of Uncontrolled Opposition, and today we're going to be recording for 1 hour for the radio on WBAI and the Progressive Radio Network. And we've got a discussion today about oil in the Middle East, which is a lot of our foreign policy. And let's go ahead and bring on our hosts, Gloria and Jayme. How you guys doing today?
Hey, Jayme. Hey, Jayme.
Everybody seems to be in a rush today, so let's go ahead and get started, bring in on our guest. Gloria, take it away. You guys got about 55 minutes, and then I'll give you the warning, so to wrap it up. So let's do it.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria, Guillo, an investigative journalist, and I'm here with my co-host, Professor Jayme Kuzmarov, managing editor of Covert Action magazine. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. Today's guest is Charlotte Dennett, attorney, investigative journalist, and author. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guests, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. Since today's guest, Charlotte Dennett, has written extensively on oil and gas pipelines, with her latest book titled Follow the Pipelines, we'd like to briefly highlight the historic relationship between U.S. wars and pipelines. Keep in mind the word war really means U.S. bombing campaigns, invasions, and occupations. And this is often accomplished through coups and by using proxy armies. Over the last 25 years, U.S. wars have followed a consistent pattern. The official story is defense, democracy, or counterterrorism, but geography tells the truth. Seems that every battlefield sits on an energy route, a pipeline, a corridor, a transit hub, or a gas market. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Ukraine. Let's start with Afghanistan. The target was the I can't say this word, it's a toughie. Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. In the 90s, Union Oil Company of California brought the Taliban officials to Texas for talks. When negotiations collapsed, Washington invaded. 2 decades later, U.S. bases sit directly on that pipeline corridor. Iraq next. In 1999, Dick Cheney said it clearly: the Mideast, with two-thirds of the world's oil and the lowest cost, is still where the prize ultimately lies. In the 2003 invasion, Iraq was destroyed. ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP, and Shell took the contracts. Pipelines and exports fell under US and European control. Then Syria. Qatar proposed a pipeline through Syria and Turkey. Assad rejected it. In 2011, Syria signed with Iran and Iraq instead. That same year, the US and Gulf states armed proxies. One of them was Abu Muhammad al Jalani, Al Qaeda, funded through the CIA's Timber Sycamore program. Today, US troops occupy Syria's oil fields and escort crude oil out of the region. Ukraine was the next front. In 2014, Washington backed a coup. I'm just having trouble today. Yanukovych was overthrown after rejecting we'll take this one over again. Sorry, Jayme. Yanukovych was overthrown after rejecting an EU deal that cut Russia out. Victoria Nuland leaked phone call showed US officials picking the new cabinet. Billions in US money supported the regime change. And in 2022, the US blew up Nord Stream. Anthony Blinken called it a tremendous strategic opportunity, not to Europe's economy, but a boon for Washington. The map is consistent. Afghanistan occupied for a pipeline, Iraq invaded for oil and routes, Syria broken for refusing a US line, Ukraine's government overthrown and pipelines destroyed to sever Europe from Russia. This is not defense. It's not democracy. It's pipelines. It's invasion, coup, proxy armies, and theft. Pipelines mark the front lines of US wars. Thank you. Charlotte, please update our audience on your lovely book and take it away.
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate the French pronunciation of my name, Charlotte Dennett. It's Dennett, like Bennett, just for
Thank
clarification.
you.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Gaza. How about that? I think that's very key to our understanding. First of all, I appreciate the intro. Most people have a sense that these wars are about oil, but they don't know the specifics, and that's what I provide in my book. I've got 12 different pipeline maps, and you've identified a lot of it. Congratulations. With Gaza, there's $500 billion worth of oil and natural gas off the coast of Gaza, Israel, Lebanon, and Syria. And it was discovered in 2000 and then again in 2010. And the Israelis wanted to be sure that the Gazans did not get control over the so-called Gaza Marine, which is they're entitled to. So there were before the October 2023 invasion of Gaza, there were two other ones. There was one in 2009 and again in 2014. And the whole purpose was to prevent Gazans from controlling and developing the energy off their coast. The idea that was that that the proceeds would not go to the Gazans, but instead would be used to advance terrorism in the region. And that's sort of typical propaganda that comes out of Israel. And to this day, the Gazans do not control that oil and natural gas. And when it was first discovered, Yasser Arafat, the then head of the PLO, had seen it as a great boon to the Palestinian people. Finally, they would have some economic independence. But instead, as you can see, what do we have? Genocide. And what I've been able to document is that what Israel aspires to become is an energy corridor, and I really encourage people to get out a map. You got to look at that Eastern Mediterranean region. It's very key because well, when I was there as a reporter in the early 70s, people were talking about Lebanon. I was based in Lebanon as being the gateway to the Middle East, but I soon became to learn it's the gateway to Middle East oil, and that's how oil companies look at it, because there are pipelines that connect to Iraq oil and obviously Saudi oil, and it's the Trans-Arabian pipeline, especially, and that's how I got into this whole pipeline thing, because my father was America's first master spy in the Middle East. His last mission was to Syria to determine the route of the Trans-Arabian pipeline, and that was a key to developing the United States into a superpower is the U.S. control of Saudi oil. To this day, as you know, Saudi Arabia is key as an ally of the United States, but it also being sort of the head of the Muslim world, it has to think about its base. And so Saudi Arabia has not fully come on board, even though there have been contacts going on between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Maybe I should stop there. I've given a very large overview.
I just want to say one
Gloria. I got
thing.
a couple questions, but go ahead, Gloria.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. I have very limited understanding of this topic, but what I recall is that this Middle East oil is a more refined grade, even though it's crude. It's a better quality, let's say, requires less refinement than, let's say, oil from Venezuela. Is that something that is also involved? How easy it is to use this oil and to refine it?
Well, actually, I don't feel I have the expertise to answer your question on that. All I can say is the title of my book, Follow the Pipelines. The subtitle is Uncovering the Mystery of a Lost Spy and the Deadly Politics of the Great Game for Oil. And what's going on now in the world is the oil companies are just going wild, especially with Trump in office. Drill Baby Drill was his moniker, and it's what he always says it's his top priority. So the great game is between different powers. During my father's time, during World War II, he discovered that he was spying not on the Germans, but on our own allies, French, Russians, and the French and the Russians and the British. And so they're all out to get the oil. The reason is because it's the fuel of the military. And in that sense, your inquiry is correct, because they're always looking for better refined oil that can be used for jet fighters, for instance. But this aspect is never discussed in the press, and yet it is key. It remains the fuel of the military, and any power that wants to assume to be a major power in the world is constantly looking for new sources of oil and making sure that other powers don't get it. And so I would say they're looking for it everywhere, whether it's a better quality or not. That's important, it is, but it's a free-for-all now. My father predicted there would be a free-for-all after World War II, which there was, and it's been revived under Trump. He's destroying all these environmental reforms that would limit fossil fuel emissions. So that's the state of the world that we're in right now.
And yeah, maybe, thank you. That's a very good analysis. Maybe you can just say a bit more about your father and what you learned about him through your investigations, and then, the suspicious plane crash, and then maybe we can get back into some contemporary affairs.
Sure. Well, yeah, that's because that history is unusual. And it gave me the basis for understanding better the Middle East. So he was stationed in Lebanon. He was sent there in 1944. He first worked for the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, and his cover was cultural attaché. Reason for that is that he had a deep understanding of the Middle East and its peoples because he had been sent to the American University of Beirut in the 30s and had taught students from all over the Middle East. And he developed a great love for the culture and for the people of that region. And he had a unique understanding to the point that his code name was Carat, C-A-R-A-T, as in jewel. Most other code names are like monkey and squirrel and so on. So that gives you an idea of how he was valued. And I sued the CIA under FOIA. And one of the key documents that I got, it's called an analysis of work. And in that 1944 document, he reiterates what his marching orders are. And top among them, and this was a heavily redacted document, top among them, one line missed the redactor's pen, and that is, we must protect the oil at all costs. And this stayed with me. The more I started to look into oil wars in the Middle East, I came to realize that this was like a meme, an unmentioned objective throughout the whole post-war, Cold War history, going right up to the present. We must control the oil at all costs. And then you have to ask yourself, what have the costs been? What have the costs been over the last 8 decades in terms of human loss of life? So anyway, that is, wait a minute, my battery's running low here. Hold on.
I'll just jump in. There's a very funny show that Jimmy Dore does when Trump was. I'm hearing some noise. Maybe it's your mic.
Oh, it's gone. Yeah.
Okay, great. There was a very funny show that Jimmy Dore did, and it was with Trump in his first presidency. And they've got him on, and he's just going, "Yeah, we got the oil. We got the oil." And the newscaster's going, well, maybe you don't want to say it that way. No, we got the oil. It's okay. We got the oil. It's actually quite funny. And Jimmy Dore goes, oh, he said the quiet part out loud, and he did, and it definitely supports exactly what you're saying. And we can't hear you there. You're muted.
Okay. That was when Trump initially said that he wanted all American troops out of Syria. I think that's the one it's referring to. And then someone must have filled him in. Oopsie, wait a minute. We got to keep our troops in the eastern region because that's where Syrian oil is. So Trump had to reverse himself and said, oh, yeah, because we control oil. So the U.S. has been occupying northeastern Syria ever since 2000, the so-called civil war that began around 2011. And now that Assad is gone, boy, aren't they happy about that. But anyway, to continue with my father, his last mission was to Saudi Arabia, and the purpose of it was to determine the route of the Trans-Arabian Pipeline. I found a wonderful New York Times article dated March 2, 1947, which was 2 weeks before his plane crashed. And it was all about a pipeline. This new pipeline adds to Middle East issues, is how it's titled. And then the subtitle is about the position of Russia is of concern. So you can see that ever since the end of World War II, and I would say right up to the present, they're always looking at the position of Russia. Obviously, it has a major, large reserves of oil and natural gas. So the two major superpowers are Russia and the United States, and they've been, spying on each other and warring with each other covertly and overtly, for decades. He left. I got his last letter home and his last report home. And one of the things I found most interesting is that the TAP line company, that's a Trans-Arabian pipeline company, was concerned that Syria was resisting having the pipeline traverse Syrian territory through the Golan Heights, by the way. And so what happened is my father, dutifully wrote this up. And after his death,
And I just want to add a point of information. The Golan Heights at that point was in Syria, right? It was not
yeah,
in
it's
Israel.
Syrian territory. It's been
Thank you.
occupied by Israel ever since 1967. So, yes, where was I? After my father died, and I can get back to the plane crash, but after that, the person who replaced him was Archie Roosevelt, Teddy's grandson. And Archie and Kermit were responsible for staging a coup in Syria. Most people think the first CIA coup was in Tehran. No, it was in Syria. And Jayme, you're shaking your head, yes, and you've written a book about Syria. So I'm sure you want to get in on that one. Anyway, then after my father wrote his last report, he was sent to Ethiopia, and Haile Selassie was very keen on developing strong ties with the U.S. Ethiopia was totally under British control. Everything, its radios and its communications, its railroads, everything was controlled by the Brits. Haile Selassie really resented that, and so had invited the Americans in and gave them an exclusive concession to look for oil. And I found out that the U.S. petroleum attaché was on this plane. It went from Saudi Arabia to Asmara, Eritrea. They stayed overnight, and then they took off in the morning, headed for Addis Ababa. The purpose of it was not only to meet with Ethiopian oil officials, but to set up a new airlines, which would become Ethiopian Airlines. It would be controlled by the Ethiopians, but managed by TWA. And this just freaked out the British. That I've been able to ascertain. And the year before, my father's plane took off, and it crashed in the mountains of Ethiopia. There were 6 people on board. I got the accident report. The CIA did not rule out sabotage. And I would later talk to one of the CIA officials who replaced my father in the Middle East. And he told me, he says, we always thought it was sabotage, but we couldn't prove it. So part of my book is a very personal effort to get behind what was behind the plane crash. But in the process, I learned a great deal. And part of what I learned is how fierce the Great Game was after World War II. So go ahead, ask me more.
Who done it?
Who done it? Well, I think I have established the motive. I can't totally establish the actual individuals. And I come to the conclusion, so I'll give it away in the book, that it was both the British and the Russians who were very keen on stopping U.S. penetration of the Middle East. And then I found one common denominator to both. They both were keenly interested in Ethiopia. They were keenly concerned about U.S. developing more military bases around the world and getting more oil. But there's one person that links that motive, and he was the most famous spy of the 20th century, Kim Philby. Philby was very active in monitoring the Middle East during this time. He in 1946-47, he was stationed in Turkey. He was overseeing a lot of what was going on in the Middle East. And he was in charge of British counterintelligence while secretly working for the Russians. So he was my father's direct opposite, because my father was in charge of counterintelligence for the Middle East. They had to have known each other. And yet, interestingly, I have not been able to find a single document showing that they communicated with each other. That's going to require more digging. But in terms of motive, I think I've established it in the book, and I've gone into greater detail on that. So my quest continues. But when you're working, you're a double agent. You got to deliver for both, and that's why I'm saying Philby would have been the perfect guy. He gave something to Brits and he gave something to Russians by downing this plane, and there were very high level people on board. I also found the accident report showed a smashed aerial camera. Well, what was the aerial camera used for? It was used to look at geography and to track pipeline routes, and they were most interested in developing oil in the Agadan region, and air power became another huge issue in the post-war era, and one of the reasons is because you can survey the ground below without having to put troops in the area. It's more efficient. And so that was going to be a new area of geopolitical competition among the big powers.
And I know that Archie Roosevelt was involved in setting up the American Friends of the Middle East. And I think he was among a faction that was weary of the U.S. aligning too closely with the Zionist movement because of that it would alienate, Arab country that the U.S. needed for the oil. I don't know if you found anything in your father's records about that or his attitude toward the Zionist movement in Israel.
Well, a lot of State Department people during the war and afterwards, they were very concerned about it, frankly. And that included my father. In fact, my father stated that the question is, where was Tapline going to terminate? Was it going to terminate in Palestine, in Haifa, which already was a developed refinery and oil port since World War One? We could go into that one and the Balfour Declaration and what that meant. But at any rate, yeah. So you don't want conflict in any region where you're going to set up a major infrastructure project like a pipeline. And one of the things I learned is no bank will finance it if there's conflict. So in my father's time, he did not want the pipeline terminating in Palestine, soon to become Israel, because there was a lot of conflict. The British were fighting. The Jews were fighting the British. They wanted them out, and the Arabs were fighting the Jews. So it just wasn't a good place. Whereas southern Lebanon, which is where Tapline ended, was considered a safe place. And I just want to add to what's going on now in Gaza. My theory is that that Netanyahu wants to establish Israel as an energy corridor, and you can't have conflict in the region. Obviously, there's conflict. So their solution is what? Flattening Gaza, depopulating it, getting rid of Hamas, absolutely destroying it, and then set up a good infrastructure. Forget about the real estate bonanza, which is real, but the biggest benefit to the West and Israel is to set up this energy corridor, which will tap into Israel's supplies and offshore oil and natural gas and ship it to Europe, which has been hurting ever since the sabotage of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which would have made Europe even more dependent on Russian oil and gas. They were already 40% dependent on it before the Ukraine war. So you see, it's all interconnected. It's even currently, and you go back to the past and you can see the patterns. And it's exactly this analysis that the powers that be do not want the people to have, because again, it's about fueling the military. So you won't see it. You won't see it in any media explanations. And that means cable, network TV. There's a lot of progressive outlets that don't know about it. They don't know about it because it never gets discussed. So I'm trying to break through and if I can use the word, elevate the discussion beyond the ethnic and religious and historical conflicts, which are real and have been used by great powers, divide and rule, and say, look, who's benefiting and what's the cost and who's hurt? It's the people. that have not benefited, really. I mean, in terms of lives lost in 8 decades, it's millions and millions. And but that analysis just doesn't make the airwaves, so to speak.
Well, I
Yeah,
just
and
want to
if I could
interject.
if I could make just one quick point before you speak, Gloria. Yeah, well, thank you. I think that's really important what you're doing, and we've discussed on this show, and that your analysis is spot on, and that we discussed also the limitations of the protest movements and the campus protests, which are legitimately outrage over the atrocities in Gaza. But yeah, they're not looking at the big picture. They're not developing a larger critique of U.S. foreign policy and movement to transform U.S. policy and connecting what's going on in Ukraine and the human suffering there too. There have been well over 1 million deaths in that conflict. So thank you. Yeah, I think it's very vital what you're exposing and discussing.
I
Go
will
ahead,
say
Gloria.
one group that's got it. Um, I was recently, I mean, understands the analysis, and they invited me to address their 40th convention, as it turned out in Nevada. And this is Veterans for Peace. I was able to give a talk that made these connections, and there was very positive response to that. And of course, there would be, because vets who been in wars know that you need gas to keep going, and when you run out of supplies, you're in trouble. And one of the big lessons of World War I and World War II is that the Germans lost both wars because their war machine ran out of gas. So they get it, veterans. But that was one thing I learned. There's like these silos. There were even climate activists that were not understanding the overall picture, even though they were concerned about big oil. And there are now some groups that are catching on. I think the Methodists did a campaign to try to stop oil supplies to Israel to fight its genocidal war. So slowly people are catching on. We got to break down the silos
Well,
and give the.
I think you're
Go
very
ahead.
polite here. I don't think it's ignorance on the part of alt media. I think alt media conveniently leaves out certain things because alt media is funded by the predator class just as well as corporate media. And they may be funded, under the table and through cutouts and all kinds of stuff. But actually, our show, Uncontrolled Opposition, was previously named Left on Left. And we spend a lot of time still, even as Uncontrolled Opposition, how we got our name, focusing on the things that the left ignores and the left gets wrong because it supports the predator class narratives. So I don't think it's ignorance on that part. I think it's focused, and we found a lot of issues with climate alarmists ourselves, and they're very useful for the predator class because they keep the carbon capture industry alive, which is a huge shell game transferring resources from, let's say, ExxonMobil to all of a sudden Tesla because of these credits. So it's, instead of just cleaning up the environment by putting in, clean ways of burning, they don't do that. Instead, they create these gigantic vacuums that allow them to burn however they want. And then they suck this out of the air and then they bury it. So all of this is these billion-dollar industries in this giant shell game. So that's why I think the climate alarmists are also, useful in this whole strategy of the carbon, market. So anyway, but what you're saying is just fantastic, and we're grateful for you, laying it all out there. And I'm sorry about your dad, and what you've endured as a family from trying to do what's in the United States' best interest, but so
I appreciate that. One thing is that I was the youngest of 3 children, and I was 6 weeks old when he died, so I never knew him. And so because I never knew him, I did not have the same pain that I think my older siblings did. My brother Daniel Dennett, famous philosopher, by the way, recently deceased. Um, you know, then there was my sister, who was a congregational minister. My brother was a famous atheist, and you know, it was up to me to try to get to the bottom of this. And part of the reason was because my mother, she took her 3 kids back to the States, and I grew up in Winchester, Massachusetts. But when I was 16, she figured I was old enough, and she really wanted to go back to Lebanon. In the day she was there with my father, it was the Paris of the Middle East. It was a fantastic cultural mecca in the Middle East, and she missed it. She asked me if I'd like to go back, and I was keen on it. She had brought an Armenian maid with her little children back to the U.S. and got her to she found a match, and they married. The Armenian maid Mary Mixon, lovely woman, and Johnny. They had feasts. They had Arabic feasts for us every year, and that's how I got introduced to the Middle East. It was through the food, which is fantastic. You know, hummus and baba ganoush and shish kebab and so on. And so when my mother said, "Would you like to go back?" Yes, take me there. So I had 2 years of high school there. The greatest education I had was just being there and traveling there and meeting people there. And then my mother, I got a master's in art history in Italy later on. And then my mother died in the early 70s. So I was effectively, I was an orphan, basically. And so then I went back to the Middle East and became a journalist. And, you got to be there to have this experience. It's well, there are a lot of Americans who stayed in their little compounds and shells. But for me, I was a journalist. I was out there, traveling all over. And that's when I started to think, well, I'm kind of following my father's footsteps. But he died before the CIA was actually created. So he doesn't have the stain on him that subsequent CIA people would end up having. But the CIA ended up recognizing my father, and they actually invited me and my family in 2019 to their annual wall ceremony. You know about the stars on the stars on the wall. Every year the CIA honors its fallen, right? And they're just stars, they're no names. But during the ceremony, the names are in a book that's in front of the wall. Anyway, he was honored as the CIA's first star, even though he died before it was formally created. And I went down there with my family, and I know that they, tried to put on a good show and win me over. They even tried to recruit me at one point. I said, why do you want me? Especially because I'm older, And I was told, well, because you're curious and not afraid, which I took, I'll take it. But I became a journalist. I didn't want to work for them.
You're also an attorney. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, when you write truth to power, you don't make a lot of money. It's a rough road. Even if you're just a freelance journalist, it's a rough road. I'm sure you guys, I see the smiles. You know what it's like.
That, yeah.
Yeah. So you got to find some other way of supporting yourself. And in Vermont, we have, I think we're only one of 3 states left that have a program called Reading for the Law. And what you can do is you can apprentice in a law firm, and you do it for, I think it's 6 years, if I recall. And you put in your time and you write reports, and you get mentored by lawyers. And then if you pass the bar exam, you become an attorney. So that's how it happened. And during all this time, in my free time, I would continue to do the investigation. So that's how I've been able to support us. My husband, Gerard Colby, he suffered terribly. He wrote a book on the DuPonts, and the only unauthorized biography. It was mercilessly suppressed. We sued them. that's a whole nother story. Learned a lot.
What type of
And then
law do you practice, or did
what
you
do I
practice?
practice? Well, I started out in personal injury and medical malpractice. The reason for that is those are the firms that would take me on and can afford to pay me while I did this program as a paralegal. Because, if you win, you can earn a lot of money, but it's all on contingency. So I did that for a number of years. And then more recently, I've been doing family law, which that's a whole new dimension, I have to say. And anyway, you really get down to the suffering of people. They don't have enough legal representation, and the law cannot contemplate all the vagaries of human interactions. I thought it would be easy. It's not easy. It's very hard. But I do it. All right. I really want to retire now and want to focus on writing. We'll see what happens.
And can you say something
Buy the
about
book
your
first. I'm kidding. I'll never make a lot of money off this book. But yeah, inform
can you say
yourself.
something
Yeah.
about your work with your husband on the Rockefeller interests and the
Yeah.
destruction of the Amazon
Yeah.
forest?
Yeah. That was an 18-year endeavor. I when I left, well, here's a little anecdote. Right before the Civil War broke out in Lebanon in 1975, I was traveling in a service communal taxi towards the airport to visit a friend, and then I saw this big tank come down the road with its turrets going left and right, and everybody freaked out. We all got out of the taxi. I took shelter in a Christian school, and watched as parents came and tried to rescue their kids. And when it got to be dusk, somebody who'd been there earlier saw me, and he came back and he said, "Look, you have a choice. You can leave with me or you can stay here, but you don't know who's going to take control." I wasn't really sure what the fighting was all about. But at any rate, he said, "Let's go run across the street and I'll take you to my uncle's house." So I grabbed his hand, we raced across the street, and we were shot at. And
Wow.
and that can do something to your head as well. Obviously, they missed. And so that experience, it affected the Beirut Daily Star, which they became very protective of me, and I decided I'd sit it out for a while and went back to the States. And I always planned to return, but the Civil War lasted 15 years. Meanwhile, I met my husband in New York City. We were both doing stories on the UN, and he told me about how a couple of a Spanish reporters had gone into the Amazon and encountered some missionaries. They were on their vacation, and they were startled to see these American missionaries stepping out of a plane on a riverbank. And what are you doing there? And the missionaries took uh, these tourists and visited their high level um, communication towers. They had their own airplane fleet, and so they came back, these tourists, so to speak, and told Jerry about it. We all decided to team up and investigate more because there was genocide of Indians going on at the time. 150,000 indigenous people had been killed in the 60s and 70s, and some people thought the CIA was behind it. So we went down to Latin America to investigate. Uh, we were there 6 months. And we learned a great deal about the Summer Institute of Linguistics, which was the foreign name of the Wycliffe Bible translators. And what we began to learn is how evangelical missionaries, number one, were being used by great powers to pacify indigenous people. They even identified hostile tribes. They provided a whole map and gave it to Washington where the hostile tribes were located. This was straight out of the conquest of the West, we discovered. The whole pattern was being repeated, that if the indigenous people resisted, then there would be arsenic in candy. and smallpox blankets dropped on riverbanks to kill off the Indians. And if that didn't work, they would send in the military. So we found this pattern. And the whole point was that evangelicals were used by oil companies and agribusiness and ranchers to conquer and colonize indigenous lands. And that was a huge lesson for me as I began to apply the lessons we learned there to the Middle East. It took us 18 years. The title of the book is Thy Will Be Done, The Conquest of the Amazon, Nelson Rockefeller and Evangelism in the Age of Oil. And when we
Wow.
finished, we went around warning people that evangelicals are gaining power in Latin America, and you better watch out about what happens in our own country. And now look where we are. Anyway, Jerry was the lead author on that book. I also learned a lot from him, and that book was also suppressed, not surprisingly. That's what we have to deal with. Although both the DuPont book and the Rockefeller book are in ebooks. You can get them if you go to Amazon.com. You'll find ebooks, and we updated them, so they're still alive. But yeah, it's a difficult road.
I'm sure
we
when you
do it.
talk about pipelines and how important oil and gas are to the military, behind it all are the oligarchs, such as the Rockefellers
Yeah,
and BlackRock and all of that stuff that are making bank with these invasions, occupations, coups, and all that stuff.
yeah. I was
It
told
it,
by. I
it
was
is
told by
different.
a. Oh, go ahead.
It is different when you read about this stuff and when you live it. And, I think your, firsthand accounts are really thrilling.
Well, thank you for that. I was in touch with a fellow from Alberta in Canada where there's a lot of oil, so he knows it. And what he said to me, and it strikes true, they will stop at nothing. They will kill, they will assassinate, they will start wars, and they will ultimately, if need be, engage in ethnocide and genocide. And that's where we're living. We're living really in the age of genocide. Isn't that tragic? And of course, it's going on other places too. Terrible. Africa with genocide going on in there. And we're watching it on TV. And we feel helpless, like we can't stop it. And yet those of us who are journalists, who are writers, we have to keep trying to expose it, keep trying to get it out to the American people what's really going on here. So
Well, we
Yeah,
also
I've
discuss.
got
Go
two,
ahead,
maybe
Jeremy.
two questions. One, if you can maybe say a little bit more about Syria, and also briefly maybe the coup that the U.S. was behind, the pipeline there, and the Israeli designs now, as far as the importance of Syria to them becoming this energy corridor and power. And then if we have time, also maybe if you can briefly address how much the war in Ukraine is also an energy war, and this is kind of lost on most of the so-called
yeah,
left or anti-war
well,
groups.
the whole official explanation about the civil war in Syria that started around 2011 and went right up until uh, getting rid of Assad. That was the ultimate aim. You see, it was also there was legitimate opposition to Assad. I mean, his rule became very dictatorial, and but the main concern that the West had is that he was supported by the Russians, and Syria had a major military base on the Mediterranean, and so the West didn't like that one little bit. The other thing that the West and United States certainly was that they had wanted a pipeline to go from Qatar, which is like on the eastern coast of the Arabian Peninsula, very rich in oil and natural gas. They wanted to run a pipeline from Qatar across Saudi Arabia and across Syria, and then it would feed natural gas to Europe. Assad objected. He objected because he knew that the Russians wouldn't like that. They would see that as competition. So and then Assad came up with another plan, which was an Iran, Iraq, Syria pipeline. The West didn't like that one a little bit. And Assad even had a 4 C's strategy plan, connecting the major seas in the region, and that is the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Red Sea. They're all crucial navigational bodies of water. And so the West wouldn't have it. So my theory, and I think Jayme, you've written a book on this. You could go at great length, but I think we're in agreement that what began as a civil unrest very soon became proxy war. And the U.S. had all sorts of jihadist group that were fighting the Assad regime. And ultimately, most recently, they succeeded. And now there's resumed talks about the Qatar pipeline. And let's see, where else were we going to talk about?
I
Where else
haven't
did we-
heard
Well,
about
and also
the four
Ukraine. If you can
C's
say
before.
something about Ukraine and the Israeli interest in Syria, why the
Yeah.
Israelis were so heavily involved there, and still
Right.
are, of course.
In where
Could
are
you
you
just
saying?
explain
Wait.
the four C's a little bit more? It's the first I've ever heard of it. I'm not sure
All
about
right.
our audience. It's
Well,
fascinating.
Well, you can read it in my book, but what it is, I mean, again, get a map out and look where they are. I mean, it explains everything. For instance, the Caspian Sea. You know, the Tapi pipeline that you described was planned because it would avoid Russian interests, but it never got built because of conflict. But a pipeline that was built from the Caspian Sea that ended up in Turkey was very key to supplying Israel, frankly, with oil and natural gas. But the 4 C's are well, you'll have to look at it. I think he saw them as all being an infrastructure project, and the great game is the bypass game. You know, if we can go under the Black Sea, which the Russians have done. They've built pipelines under the Black Sea to avoid the American-owned BTC pipeline that originated in Azerbaijan and it ended up in Turkey. You've got to look at the maps and it will explain them. But everyone. I was on a show recently with frankly an Arab. I don't know what his background was, but he didn't know anything about the pipelines. He kept saying that the Straits of Hormuz is very key, and that's the Red Sea. Wait a minute, that's the Persian Gulf. But anyway, that's another sea. The Red Sea is the sea that connects all the trade of tankers that go up through the Suez Canal. Anyway, they're all passageways. They can be passageways for tankers. They can be passageways for pipelines. Oftentimes, the pipelines are put underneath the sea to avoid conflict. So beyond that, I can't say a whole lot because I haven't revived my memory of what I'd written about it. You read about it in the book, but
It's fascinating. Thank you.
It got killed. Yeah, Jayme, you want to?
Well, yeah, if you can touch on also two things. Maybe first the Ukraine, and how that really is another oil war, even though
Yeah,
we haven't seen much
absolutely.
opposition to it.
Yeah, I identified it as the mother. It could be the mother of all energy wars, way back right after the Russian invasion. And so then, well, let's just look at the whole eastern region, the Donbass region, where Russian troops have fortified themselves. And by the way, where there are a lot of Russian-speaking people, Ukraine has the largest untapped reserves of oil and natural gas in Europe, the second largest next to Russia, if you want to make Russia part of Europe. There's huge amounts there. And the richest amounts are right there. They're in the eastern region. So this is why, to my mind, the Russians are focused in controlling it, and the Americans are absolutely keen on preventing them from getting this. Burisma, the large Ukrainian energy company, on which Hunter Biden sat on the board, was very eager to develop the resources in that region after the coup. And Biden apparently was encouraging it. Another little piece of the story that doesn't get written. But anyway, yeah, and the Black Sea is loaded with oil and natural gas, and the Crimean Peninsula juts out into that. Once the Russians seized Crimea, they were able to get control over the oil and natural gas offshore that's still in the Black Sea. So I have a map of that, and I have a whole explanation of it in my book. But there you go. These are proxy energy wars. That's what they're about, and millions of people are dying because of them. It's absolutely disgusting.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
perhaps Venezuela may be the next
Oh
oil
my God.
war.
Yeah. Oh, Venezuela, my lord. Yeah, that's it. And Trump is totally
The
beholden to
the
oil.
latest lie is drug trafficking as an excuse
Oh
to
yeah.
overthrow
Yeah.
a country to steal its oil. That's the
Oh,
latest one.
it's
And can
disgusting.
you say something about Tulsa? Your visit. You wrote
Oh
an
yeah.
article about Tulsa and how when Trump went there, he was,
Yeah.
met secretly with Harold Hamm, this big oil tycoon. And
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Jeremy's from Tulsa. Well,
Yeah,
not
Oh
originally, but
wow.
he
Good
lives
I
in
for
live
you.
in the oil capital, so I know all
Oh,
about the oil people
you
and how they
know about it,
operate.
right?
And I
You
know that
right.
they're not Democrats. The industry is run in a very authoritarian way. But go ahead, about your article.
Well, I looked at I had an article in Counterpunch. I called it the Tulsa travesty, and it's because Trump is having a big fundraiser in Tulsa, and what's disgusting about it, there's the Bank of Oklahoma, big high rise that's there, major power.
And it's owned
Um,
by George Kaiser, who's a big oilman. He funds the Democratic Party. And then Harold Hamm is another big oilman in Oklahoma City. He funds the Republican Party.
there you go. There
And
you go.
neither party has very progressive. The Oklahoma Democrats are very conservative Democrats and don't touch the oil industry. And the Republicans are just totally drill baby drill. And
Really? Yeah, I found out that Ham at the time was considered like the leader of the oil renaissance, and so you do have also you have independents. Like he's in charge of Continental Resources. That's not That's not BP, Exxon, Chevron, or something. And a lot of the independents became very wealthy, particularly through fracking. They're leaders in fracking, and they've been shipping a lot of fracked oil as LNGs to Europe. They've made out big time with the Ukrainian war, the war in Ukraine. And this is
Kaiser's
what,
a big time supporter of that war, and all the liberal Democrats here are huge supporters of the Ukraine war, and academics and universities.
yeah, yeah, you don't get a fully balanced picture of Ukraine, but that's the part for everything that goes on when you have energy wars. You don't get the truth. You got to dig. By the way, though, it's not so hard to dig. I mean, you can Google, you can take any part of the world where there's a serious conflict going on and then just add the word oil. You'll be amazed at what comes up. There are various newsletters. There's oilprice.com, which I tend to look at. It's there. It's just not covered by the mainstream media. So we've got to get the word up faster.
I just looked
And
up
we're
the
getting
four
the wrap it
C's.
up sign, Gloria.
Yeah,
So.
I see it. I just put the 4C strategy in ChatGPT, and this is the first that I've learned about it. So thank you so much. Jeremy's probably an expert on this too. But just for our audience, the
Not on
concept
Charlotte's level.
the concept was that Syria could be a crossroads for oil and gas pipelines, trade, and electricity corridors between Europe, Russia, Iran, Iraq, and the Gulf states. So
Yeah.
this is huge, and whoop over my head. And so I mean, it's been really repressed. Thank you,
Yeah.
Charlotte. So
Can I
Charlotte,
just end? Do I have
no,
1 minute?
I'm gonna
Yeah,
turn it.
go
I'm
1
gonna
minute.
turn
You
it
have
back
go.
to you, Charlotte. Hang in there.
Okay.
So,
Look,
so
here's
please talk about this, but also roll into promoting your book and where people can read. If you're on Substack and other places, please identify that too. Thank you.
okay. All right. You can go to followthepipelines.com. I need to update it. I'm so busy. I can barely keep up with it all. But hey, look, this is key. Let me show you. This is, it's not going to come up. Too bad. It's a wonderful map. Google this, Netanyahu presenting map at the UN. This is 2024. One of the maps shows the curse. And that's Iran, Iraq, and Syria. It's all black on the map. And the other map is the blessing. And the blessing has this
No
big
propaganda there.
Oh, yeah. It has this big red line. And this is the new project, right? It's called the India Middle East Corridor, Middle East European Corridor. And the idea is they're going to connect India through an underground pipeline that traverses Saudi Arabia. And guess where it terminates? Just guess. Haifa, Palestine, right? And I looked at it, it looks like the same route as the Trans-Arabian pipeline that was closed in the 1990s during the Civil War. There's been efforts to reopen that pipeline. There's an effort to reopen the Iraq petroleum pipeline. Oh, you found it. That's fantastic. Yeah, isn't that something? So this is the blessing that Netanyahu's talking about. And there's another program that's going on that's also serious, and you can find it. Call it the Great Gaza Post-War Plan, and it shows all these high rises, and then you see a corridor going from south to north. It looks like a canal. There's railroads, but I suspect that in this picture is a pipeline, and that's the whole idea. They want to run a pipeline up the whole coast, and this is all supposed to be wonderful for the people, economic development, and the last I've heard is Hamas has rejected the peace proposal. That's as of today. And one of the reasons they don't trust Netanyahu or Trump. And whatever people want to think about Hamas, they had the right to reject occupation. Okay. And what happened on October 7th, 2023 deserves more of an investigation. I have a theory about that one too, if you want to hear it.
Well, so do we. We know all about that and false flag operations.
Oh my God, he let it happen.
Public and whip up hysteria through manipulating events.
He let it happen. It was his ultimate dream. Now he could really crush Gaza after those two other invasions failed. And this latest scheme is really disgusting. The whole thing.
Well, we feel you.
We have to wrap it up.
I have to wrap.
We agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Please come back and bring your husband too.
Yeah, we're going to have him on the show on October 30th. So stay tuned, audience, for him.
Well, thank you so much, you guys. I really appreciate your having me on. And folks, all I ask is that you educate yourself, right? You can do it by buying my book. I'm never going to make a lot of money with my book, but I got to get the word out.
It is a great book. I read it in the last month, and it's a terrific book.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. I can't wait to read your book. I haven't had time to read it all. Once I read it, we should get back on maybe.
Yes. Well, that wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Please find us on Substack, Twitter X, and Podbeam. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Now we're still live. We're just not being recorded for the radio now. So if you have a couple of words you'd want to say, you can, but usually we try to keep it kind of short. But if you can finish a thought. But you're still on the air. Don't take your clothes off or anything.
No, I just, it's when people like you try so hard to get the truth out there. So I'm supportive of your efforts too. It's a struggle, and our voices are needed more than ever now to try to educate the American people as we slip dangerously into fascism. I guess we're already there, folks.
Well, we
But
talk about we talk a lot about techno totalitarianism. We
mhm.
think fascism is yesterday. We see
Ah,
the oligarchs without nation state borders. Once we saw the COVID narrative explode worldwide, we said, fascism's gone. We see Trump and Biden as the same. They're just puppets for the oligarchs. The different parties have different things that they can accomplish through their various bases. So, there's some advantages to switching between the two, but it's always in the same direction. And, I just want to say, I really have tremendous fear against, what's going on right now under the Trump administration and Latin America. And I'm just becoming more and more concerned for Latin America as Trump seems
yeah,
to say that the problem is Marxist and the problem is, the left, because it's a very wide net, and it actually they have no concept. They consider Biden a Marxist, and
yeah,
it's just ridiculous. It's the corporatist calling the corporatists, something else. But
yeah.
I've been to Venezuela, I've been to Nicaragua, I've been to Cuba, and these are beautiful countries, and there's no drug trafficking going on there. There's no right for the United States to intercede and to get back on its plan to conquer Latin America. It's just horrific.
My feeling is, first of all, I have a historical treasure with my husband. This man, his knowledge goes so deep, and it's awful that he's been as suppressed as he has. But he keeps telling me, well, this happened under Hitler and this happened under Hitler. And, the loyalty oath. I think fascism is worse, frankly, because now we got troops in our streets. Okay. And we know where that's going, right? Jerry's
And the
been
problem is
predicting
the tariffs
civil
aren't
war.
working. The economy is going ever more downhill, so they're going to get
Yeah.
more desperate. So it could really turn ugly.
Yeah. It could turn very ugly, and we should all be concerned. But what are we supposed to do? The appeals are out there to fight back. We're going to fight back. But what's happening is, straight out of the playbook of the development of fascism in Germany and so on. So stay tuned, but keep
Well,
fighting.
it just
Yeah.
the concept of
I've got to run
fascism.
shortly. I can't stay and talk much longer. I've got an appointment, but thank you very much, Charlotte. And yeah, tell your husband because we plan for the 30th. So
Yes, I
yeah,
definitely will.
yeah. I've been in
Yeah,
touch with him, but make sure, yeah, he contacts me again. Yeah.
yeah,
But I read his book on a DuPont, and it's an
yeah.
incredible book because
It
I was
is an
doing some
incredible
research.
book,
And
and
I
that's
use some of it in some of my lectures because I teach U.S. history at
oh
Tulsa
great.
Community College,
Yeah.
and we're just I use some of this stuff on World
Oh,
War
good.
One and the Liberty League,
Oh,
DuPont,
great.
and then
Well,
I was also researching Joe Biden's career for an article, and there was stuff about him in that book. So and the DuPont family. So anyway,
well,
it's
he's out of
amazing
Delaware,
research. So
Yeah. Yeah,
Has
exactly.
he been researching them consistently? The book was 40 years old, right? Is he
Yeah.
still on that trail? Is he still keeping an
No,
eye on what the
actually,
Depot's up to?
you know, partly because he got to know me, he got diverted into the Middle
Uh-oh.
East. Yeah, and he may regret it ever since, I got to tell you. But his focus right now is on a book tentatively titled, very uncontroversial title, Oil and the Holocaust. Okay.
Whoa.
hmm.
Yeah, huge topic. It's all about how FDR failed to rescue the Jews in the 40s, 1944, when they were pleased to bomb Auschwitz, and the decision was not to bomb Auschwitz, which would have, gone after the killing machine. There would have been more Jews that had been rescued. The reason that he didn't do that in 44 is because Saudi Arabia said, if you create a Jewish state in Palestine, you're going to lose your oil concession. So the first people who ever held up placards, as far as I know, were saying no blood for oil were European Jews who had made it to Palestine, and they knew what the game was. Their rescue was delayed to protect the U.S. exclusive concession with Saudi oil. And it was finally worked
Wow.
out with Rockefeller in 45. They smoothed things over. But yeah,
Yeah, and that's not known because as a historian, and I've had students do research. I mean, there's a good book, The Abandonment of the Jews by David
yeah,
Wyman, but
yeah.
he doesn't really, I think he might touch on Saudi Arabia, but he really doesn't go into that dimension. So this is
No,
really
it's not
path-breaking
discussed.
scholarship.
And
Yeah.
also the Balfour Declaration, British support of a Palestinian state. There's an oil connection to that one. The
I
Iraq
can't wait to
Petroleum
hear it.
Company.
You got to come back.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, I
there's
got
an
it
oil
on. Yeah,
connection
and
to
Charlotte,
that.
my article on will be out this month on your our interview and stuff. So,
Okay, well, that's great, Jeremy.
Where's
Thank you.
Jayme? Usually Jayme
okay,
comes
take
in at
care,
this
guys.
point. Where's
Thanks again,
Jayme?
Charlotte.
There
That
he
was
I'm
is.
great.
here. You guys are just having such a good conversation. I didn't want to butt in. Well, thanks
Okay.
to Jeremy.
Well,
um,
Well,
well,
thank
are
you,
you guys
Charlotte.
ready
It's
to wrap?
lovely to meet you. This is the first
yeah,
time
same here,
I've met
Gloria.
Charlotte. Thank you.
Oh, it's fascinating. Absolutely. I mean, just kind
Okay.
of reinforces everything you kind of instinctively know.
Yeah.
Like it's like, I mean, especially
He's
when
got the
you
receipts.
well, especially when you grew up in like the Iraq War or both Iraq wars, and you really start to understand as those unfolded how it was all just for oil, and
Yeah.
then you start to see it repeat that same formula repeat over and over with everything we do in foreign policy. It's absolutely it's obvious when you just start to really look at it.
That's
And
right.
and our dollars are tied to the oil prices as
Absolutely.
well. So
Petrodollars. Yeah.
it's the only thing they care about. It's the
It's
only thing they
all
care about.
interconnected, the military, the oil, the financial institutions, the petrodollars. Call it late
Yeah.
capitalism, whatever, imperialism, whatever. That's the
Yeah,
game.
it's the oil empire
Yep.
of oil is what it really
Yep.
is. My only hope I have right now is like everybody's talking about they're spinning up oil war with Iran, which is probably another related to oil again.
Oh,
Um
absolutely.
and then we've got Venezuela on the horizon too, which I see that as more of I think a lot of American analysts, even the ones that don't want to admit it, are starting to admit it that Ukraine is losing, and that theater of war is probably going to close in the next couple of years. And I think they want to move the theater of war to Venezuela because you got to have constant war going on since war is our chief export. So
Venezuela has a very large oil
they
supply. I
have
think it's one of
oil,
the largest in the
Yes.
world.
right? So we want to
Absolutely.
go in there and steal their oil
Yeah.
because
And
that's what we do.
right. And they'll develop the pretext,
Yeah,
and
which is the drug stuff. But
yeah,
my hope is that I mean, it kind of looks like right now that they're trying to do both Iran and Venezuela at the same time, which is
yeah,
kind of insane. But my hope is that they're just kind of setting up for Venezuela in case something happens and they can go move in, and maybe that this government shutdown kind of just postpones the Venezuelan war indefinitely. I think Iran's coming no matter what because I don't think we're driving the bus on that one.
Well,
But
one of the things that recently happened within the last year is boats were pirated, ships were pirated by the United States that contained oil that was in transit between Iran and Venezuela, and the United States just pirated it. They just took the oil.
yeah,
yeah, no, we're thieves.
There wasn't any U.S. dollars involved. It wasn't a
We
U.S. ship. It wasn't in a U.S. Transport lane. They just came and took it.
Yeah, we
And
have a criminal government that does what they want, and they're just thieves. If you got something that out there, our mentality is everything belongs to us, the United States, and we can just take whatever we want. And so that's what they do because they're a bunch of thieves, and that's who we have in charge of our country.
our
Our
company.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably more
They're our
accurate to say
company.
it's a company,
It's the
but
company.
and we're all
It's not the United States. It's
yeah,
it's beyond
they're
the
our
United
own
States.
owners. They do whatever they want, and that's the kind of government we have. And then if you stand up in opposition to that, you're the bad guy. Say,
yeah,
no, you're not allowed to say that we're the bad guys. You're the bad guy for saying that we're the bad guys. But they're the ones who are doing all the horrible stuff while the rest of us are minding our own business.
Well,
yeah.
this
Well,
is why we don't have millions of hits on our YouTube channel. We are so moderated and so
Well,
shadow banned. It's,
that's one of the reasons.
please like us, folks, so that we can continue.
The other
Yeah.
reason is we don't go often enough. If you want to build on YouTube, you got to be going every day. That's the other big thing.
Well, we don't have the finances to support an
No.
everyday broadcast
No.
either. We will get other things we're doing, but hey,
We
spend
do
some
our
money.
best.
Yeah.
Hit the buttons.
I mean, yeah, if I were doing my own show, I could probably go like 3 or 4 days a week, but I don't have the context. And honestly, I don't really want to be on the guy on camera. I don't want to do it. I probably could do it, but I don't want to. So anyway,
Here's
Anyway.
here's a final thought for you. A famous quote. Control the oil, you control the world. Henry Kissinger, protege of Nelson Rockefeller.
Yes,
Still stands
well
true
said.
today.
Well said.
Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah.
All
Well,
right.
and the thing is,
thanks-
the villains we
thanks,
used
Charlotte.
to have were a lot smarter than the villains we have now.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
yeah,
we're off.
all right. Thank you, Charlotte.
Yeah.
Gloria had to run. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show. So I know they're going to be looking forward to talking to you again.
Thank
so for
you.
everybody at home that's watching, if you're watching this on video on demand, thank you so much. Definitely leave a like, subscribe. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. We're on the Pasta to Go channel because our executive producer is Craig Pasta Jardula. And so thank you for watching us here. And we'll see you next week with another show. Have a good one and have a great weekend.